The morning sun painted golden streaks across Silverstone National Park as Andre Collins adjusted his ranger hat and started his daily patrol. 6 years on the job had taught him to appreciate these quiet moments before hikers filled the trails. The late September air carried a hint of the coming fall, crisp and clean against his face as he walked the familiar paths, checking trail markers and picking up the occasional piece of litter left behind. Andre loved these mountains more than anywhere else on Earth. Growing up in the city, he'd never seen stars until a school trip brought him here at age 12. That night, looking up at the endless sky, something inside him changed forever. Now at 34, he couldn't imagine doing anything else with his life but protecting this slice of wilderness. "Morning, Ranger Collins," called Mrs. Patterson, a local who walked the easier trails every morning with her small dog. Andre waved back with a smile. He knew most of the regulars by name: the bird watchers, the morning joggers, the amateur photographers chasing the perfect sunrise shot. They were the easy part of his job. The challenging days came when unprepared tourists ventured too far from marked paths or ignored weather warnings. After checking the main visitor area, Andre headed toward Eagle Ridge, a more remote section that had been reporting damaged trail signs. He'd packed his repair kit, some extra water, and his emergency medical supplies, standard procedure for venturing into the less traveled areas of the park. The 2-hour hike to Eagle Ridge passed pleasantly. Andre stopped occasionally to photograph unusual fungi for the park's research team, or to make notes about trail conditions in his small, weathered notebook. Reaching the ridge by mid-morning, he spotted the vandalized signs and set to work, carefully restoring the directional markers that kept hikers safe. As he hammered the last sign into place, a sound caught his attention, faint but distinct against the background noise of rustling leaves and distant birdsong. Andre paused, turning his head slightly to better catch the sound. There it was again, a human voice calling out, not the happy shout of hikers greeting each other, but something different, something wrong. Andre packed his tools quickly and moved toward the sound, calling out, "Park Ranger, do you need help?" The voice responded, weaker now. "Help, down here! I've fallen." Following the voice led Andre to a steep section of trail that curved around a particularly treacherous bend. The safety railing that should have protected the edge had broken away, something he'd need to report immediately. Carefully approaching the edge, he looked down into a rocky ravine about 30 feet below. There, wedged between two large boulders, was a woman. From his vantage point, Andre could see she was conscious but clearly injured, her hiking clothes torn and dirty, a smear of blood visible on her forehead. "I'm Ranger Collins," he called down, keeping his voice calm and clear. "Are you alone? How badly are you hurt?" "I think my leg is broken," the woman replied, her voice tight with pain. "And my ankle. I can't climb out. I've been here since yesterday afternoon." Andre's training kicked in immediately. "I'm going to get you out of there, but first I need to assess the situation. Have you had any water?" "A little. My bottle fell, but I can just reach it." "Good. What's your name?" "Eleanor." "Eleanor Chen. Okay, Eleanor. I'm going to call this in. Then I'm coming down to you. Don't try to move." Andre radioed park headquarters, giving his location and describing the situation. The news wasn't good. The nearest helicopter rescue team was assisting with a forest fire 2 counties over. Ground support could reach them, but not until late afternoon. "Copy that," Andre acknowledged, looking at the gathering clouds. A storm was moving in faster than predicted. Waiting wasn't an option. "I'm proceeding with immediate assistance. The visitor has been exposed overnight and requires medical attention. Request emergency medical team meet us at North Trail access point." Decision made, Andre returned to the edge. "Eleanor, help is coming, but they won't reach us for several hours. I'm coming down to you now. I'm trained for this, so just stay calm." Andre secured his rescue rope to a sturdy tree and double-checked his equipment. The descent would be tricky. The ravine walls were steep and loose in places with few good footholds. Taking a deep breath, he began his careful climb down, testing each hold before trusting it with his weight. Loose gravel skittered away under his boots several times, but his grip remained sure. About halfway down, the winds picked up, whipping his uniform against his body. The approaching storm was accelerating. They'd need shelter soon. Reaching Eleanor took 15 tense minutes. Up close, Andre could see she was in her mid-30s with short dark hair and determined eyes that couldn't quite hide her pain. Her left leg was bent at an unnatural angle, and her hiking boot had been removed from a swollen ankle. "You actually came," she whispered, surprise in her voice. "Of course I did," Andre replied, kneeling beside her to check her vital signs. "That's my job." Her pulse was rapid but strong. The head wound had stopped bleeding but needed cleaning. The broken leg was his biggest concern. "I need to examine your injuries," he explained, pulling medical supplies from his pack. "This might hurt, but I'll be as gentle as I can." Eleanor nodded, biting her lip as Andre carefully assessed her injuries. The leg was definitely broken, but the bone hadn't pierced the skin, a small mercy. Her ankle was severely sprained, and she was dehydrated and showing early signs of hypothermia after the cold night. "You've got a nasty break," he told her honestly, "and that ankle needs proper medical attention. You've also got a mild concussion from that head wound. The good news is I don't think you have any spinal injuries, which means we can move you if we're careful." As Andre cleaned and bandaged her head wound, Eleanor studied his face. "You seem so calm," she observed. "Do you rescue people often?" Andre smiled slightly as he worked. "More often than I'd like. People underestimate these mountains." He offered her water and some energy bars from his pack. "Small sips," he instructed. "Your body needs to adjust after being without food and water." While Eleanor ate, Andre surveyed their surroundings. The ravine offered little protection from the approaching storm, and the temperature was dropping rapidly. They needed to find shelter and stabilize her leg before attempting any movement. "We've got a storm coming," he explained, pointing to the darkening sky. "I'm going to splint your leg, then we need to find better shelter." Using branches and bandages from his medical kit, Andre crafted a sturdy splint for Eleanor's broken leg. Each movement caused her pain, but she remained stoic, only the tightening around her eyes betraying her discomfort. "You're tough," Andre commented as he finished securing the splint. "Necessity," Eleanor replied with a thin smile. "When you're alone in the world, you learn to handle pain." The simple statement carried weight beyond her current situation, but Andre didn't press. Instead, he scanned the ravine and spotted a shallow cave-like overhang about 50 yards away. It would provide better protection from the elements. "See that overhang?" he pointed. "We need to get there before this storm hits. I can carry you, but it won't be comfortable." Eleanor nodded grimly. "Do what you need to do." With careful movements, Andre lifted Eleanor into his arms. She was lighter than he expected, and she instinctively wrapped her arms around his neck for stability. The short journey to the overhang was challenging, with Andre picking his way carefully over the uneven ground, trying to minimize jostling her injured leg. They reached the natural shelter just as the first heavy raindrops began to fall. The overhang was deep enough to keep them dry and block the wind. Andre gently set Eleanor down on the flattest section of ground, then quickly unpacked emergency supplies, a space blanket, his spare jacket, and the remainder of his food and water. "The team won't be able to reach us until this passes," he explained, wrapping the space blanket around her shoulders. "But we're okay here. I've got supplies and they know our location." The storm hit with full force minutes later, wind driving sheets of rain into the ravine. Andre positioned himself to block the worst of the spray from reaching Eleanor. His uniform soon soaked despite the shelter. "You're getting drenched," Eleanor observed. "Share the blanket at least." Andre shook his head. "I'm used to these conditions. You need it more than I do." As darkness fell, the temperature dropped further. Andre built a small emergency fire using materials from his pack, careful to keep it small enough that the smoke would vent properly from their shelter. The dancing flames cast warm light across the stone walls, creating a small pocket of comfort in the wild night. "Why were you hiking alone?" Andre asked as he checked Eleanor's pulse again. "It's never safe, especially on these trails." Eleanor stared into the flames before answering. "I needed space to think. My life has been complicated lately. Too many people wanting things from me." She looked up at him. "Out here, I'm just another hiker." "It's freeing." Andre nodded, understanding more than she might have expected. "The mountains don't care who you are or what you own. They treat everyone equally." "Exactly," Eleanor said, surprise in her voice. "That's exactly it." They talked through the long hours of the night, Andre keeping Eleanor awake because of her concussion. He shared stories of dramatic rescues and the quiet beauty of dawn patrols. She spoke of growing up in a coastal city, her love of sailing, and her recent exhaustion with her high-pressure job. though she remained vague about exactly what that job entailed. By morning, the storm had passed, leaving behind a washed-clean world and the distant sound of the rescue team making their way toward the ravine. Eleanor had developed a fever during the night, her body fighting the trauma of her injuries. "They're coming," Andre reassured her, hearing the rescue team's calls. "Just a little longer." Eleanor gripped his hand suddenly. "Thank you," she said, her eyes intense despite the fever. "Most people wouldn't have stayed all night." "I wouldn't leave anyone alone out here," Andre replied simply. What neither of them knew, as the medical team finally reached them and began the careful process of extracting Eleanor from the ravine, was that this chance encounter would change both their lives forever. Andre Collins had simply done his job, rescuing an injured hiker from a dangerous situation. He had no way of knowing that Eleanor Chen, with her simple hiking clothes and quiet manner, controlled resources that could reshape the future of the very park he loved so deeply. As the rescue team lifted Eleanor onto a stretcher, her hand slipped from his. Their paths had crossed by chance, separated by circumstance, but would soon converge again in ways neither could imagine. The hospital room was quiet except for the steady beep of monitors and the occasional squeak of rubber-soled shoes passing in the hallway. Eleanor Chen stared out the window at the mountains in the distance, their peaks fading into the afternoon haze. 3 days had passed since her rescue, and the doctors had confirmed what Andre had suspected: a clean break in her left leg, a severely sprained ankle, and a mild concussion. Eleanor sighed and adjusted the thin hospital pillow behind her head. The painkillers made her thoughts fuzzy, but not fuzzy enough to stop her from checking her phone every few minutes. No one from her company had noticed she was missing yet. She'd scheduled this rare week off months ago, instructing her assistant to hold all calls and emails. For once, her strict boundaries about vacation time worked against her. A soft knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. "Come in," she called, expecting another nurse with medication. Instead, Andre Collins stepped into the room. Still in his ranger uniform but without his usual gear, he carried a small potted plant with tiny white flowers and looked strangely out of place in the sterile hospital environment. "You came?" Eleanor said, unable to hide her surprise. Andre smiled, setting the plant on her bedside table. "Thought you might like something from the mountains to keep you company. These grow near where I found you." "Mountain stars," Eleanor identified them immediately. "They're beautiful." Andre raised an eyebrow, impressed. "Most visitors can't name a single plant in the park." "I read a lot," she explained with a small shrug. "And I've always loved wildflowers." What she didn't say was that she owned one of the world's most comprehensive digital libraries on native plant species, a pet project she'd funded years ago. Andre pulled up the visitor's chair beside her bed. "How are you feeling?" "Like I fell down a mountain," Eleanor replied dryly, then softened. "Better than yesterday. The doctor says I'll need surgery on the leg, but they're waiting for the swelling to go down." Andre nodded, his expression serious. "I filled out the incident report for the park. The railing that broke, it was on our repair list, but budget cuts pushed it back." His jaw tightened slightly. "It shouldn't have happened." "It wasn't your fault," Eleanor said firmly, maybe not directly, but he shook his head. "Anyway, I came to see how you're doing, not to talk about park funding problems." Eleanor's interest piqued. "No, tell me. What's happening with the park's budget?" Andre seemed hesitant, but eventually sighed. "Same old story. The park service keeps getting less money each year, but visitor numbers keep going up. We're stretched thin. Trail maintenance, wildlife programs, education initiatives, they all get cut. We've lost 3 ranger positions in the last 2 years." Eleanor listened intently, her business mind automatically analyzing the problem. "That's not sustainable." "No, it's not," Andre agreed. "But unless some wealthy benefactor decides a national park is a worthy investment, we'll keep doing the best we can with what we have." He smiled, clearly trying to lighten the mood. "But enough about that. The nurses said you haven't had any visitors. Is there someone I can call for you?" Eleanor shook her head. "No need. My assistant knows I'm taking personal time. I'll contact the office when I'm ready." Andre looked troubled. "What about family?" "My parents died when I was in college." "No siblings," Eleanor answered simply. Years of practice made it easy to deliver this information without emotion, though the old ache never truly disappeared. "I'm sorry," Andre said, and unlike when most people said those words, He seemed to genuinely mean it. It was a long time ago, Eleanor replied. What about you? Any family nearby? Andre's face brightened. My mom lives about an hour away. She raised my sister and me on her own after Dad left. My sister's in Seattle now with her husband and my nephew. You're close with them? As close as we can be with our schedules. Mom still makes me Sunday dinner whenever I can make it down. She'd have my hide if I missed too many. His warm laugh filled the small room and Eleanor found herself smiling in response. Their conversation flowed easily after that. Andre told stories about growing up, about how his mother had worked 2 jobs to send him to college, about his dream of running his own wildlife conservation program someday. Eleanor shared less but listened more, asking questions that drew out more details about his life and work. When a nurse finally came in with Eleanor's medication, both were surprised to discover 2 hours had passed. I should let you rest, Andre said, standing. But I could come back tomorrow, bring you some decent food. Hospital meals aren't exactly 5-star. Eleanor hesitated only briefly before nodding. I'd like that. True to his word, Andre returned the next day with homemade sandwiches and fresh fruit, and the day after that with books about the park's history. On the 4th day, he brought his laptop to show her photographs he'd taken throughout the park. Eleanor found herself looking forward to his visits, the highlight in days otherwise filled with medical tests, painful physical therapy, and secret work emails she answered when the nurses weren't looking. Andre never asked what she did for a living, and she never volunteered the information. For the first time in years, she was simply Eleanor, not Eleanor Chen, CEO of Chentech Global with its 70,000 employees and market value of $89 billion. On the morning of her scheduled surgery, Andre arrived earlier than usual. Just wanted to wish you luck, he said, seeming almost shy as he handed her another small plant. The nurse said you can't eat anything before surgery, so I brought this instead. Eleanor cradled the tiny pot with its delicate purple flowers. Thank you. For everything. You've made this whole ordeal much more bearable. Andre rubbed the back of his neck. It's nothing. He stopped, then started again. I know what it's like to be alone in a hospital. The simple statement revealed more than any of his stories had, and Eleanor felt a deeper connection form between them. I'll be fine, she assured him. The doctor says it's a routine procedure. I know. Andre nodded. Still, I'll stop by tomorrow to check on you. After he left, Eleanor reached for her phone and hesitated. Then decision made, she called her most trusted board member. Thomas, I need a favor. No questions asked. The surgery went smoothly, and true to his word, Andre visited the next day, bringing a small chess set to help pass the time during her recovery. He taught her the basic moves, laughing at her intensely focused expression as she contemplated each piece. You look like you're solving world hunger instead of deciding whether to move a pawn, he teased. I like to consider all angles. Before making a decision, she replied, finally moving her knight. In my line of work, hasty choices can be costly. Andre raised an eyebrow. And what line of work is that? You've never said. Eleanor paused, wondering how much to reveal. I'm in technology, mostly behind the scenes. Andre nodded, not pressing further, which Eleanor appreciated. Most people would have asked follow-up questions, trying to assess her importance, her connections, her net worth. Andre simply moved his bishop and continued their game. Later that week, as Eleanor was flipping through television channels during Andre's visit, a breaking news banner flashed across the screen. The reporter announced that Chentech Global had just pledged $50 million to national park conservation efforts, with a significant portion earmarked for Silverstone National Park. Andre straightened in his chair, staring at the screen in disbelief. Did you hear that? That's incredible. Eleanor kept her expression neutral despite her racing heart. Good news for your park. Good news? It's amazing news. Andre's entire face lit up with excitement. Do you know what this means? The trail repairs? The educational programs we've wanted to start? Maybe even restoring those ranger positions? He shook his head in wonder. I can't believe it. The news segment continued, showing footage of Chentech's headquarters and stock images of national parks. When they displayed a photograph of Eleanor at a recent tech conference, she quickly changed the channel. Wait, Andre said. I wanted to hear the rest. It's just corporate PR, Eleanor dismissed. Let's watch something else. Andre looked at her curiously but didn't argue. You don't seem as excited as I expected. I thought you liked the park. I do, she assured him. It's great news. I've seen how these corporate donations work. There are usually strings attached. You're probably right, Andre conceded, his enthusiasm dimming slightly. Still, it's the best news the park's had in years. Eleanor felt a twinge of guilt at dampening his excitement, but she wasn't ready to reveal her identity. Not yet. Not when he looked at her as just Eleanor, a woman who'd fallen on a hiking trail, not as a powerful CEO whose net worth fluctuated by millions depending on the stock market's daily whims. As Andre's visit ended, and he promised to return the next day, Eleanor watched him leave with mixed emotions. The donation would help secure the park's future and Andre's job, but she knew that eventually her two worlds would collide. She just hoped that when Andre discovered who she really was, it wouldn't change how he saw her. Outside her hospital room, a glossy business magazine lay abandoned on a waiting room table, her face on the cover beneath the headline, Eleanor Chen, the reclusive genius behind Chentech's rise to dominance. It was only a matter of time before someone made the connection. Eleanor leaned back against her pillows and closed her eyes. For the first time in years, she'd found someone who valued her for herself, not her wealth or power. The thought of losing that genuine connection made her chest tighten with an unfamiliar feeling, one that had nothing to do with her injuries, and everything to do with the park ranger who'd carried her through a storm. Andre Collins whistled softly as he walked down the hospital corridor, carrying a small bag of fresh blueberry muffins from the local bakery. 2 weeks had passed since Eleanor's surgery, and their daily visits had become the highlight of his otherwise routine days. There was something refreshing about her, the way she listened intently when he spoke, how she challenged his ideas without dismissing them, her quiet humor that appeared when he least expected it. Approaching her room, Andre noticed unusual activity. A tall man in an expensive suit stood outside the door, speaking in hushed tones on a phone. The man gave Andre a measuring look as he approached, then stepped aside. Andre knocked lightly on the partially open door. "Eleanor?" "It's Andre. Come in," she called, sounding different somehow, more formal than usual. Andre entered to find Eleanor sitting up in bed, her laptop open, several folders spread across her blanket. She quickly closed the computer when she saw him. "Sorry," Andre said, hesitating at the doorway. "I can come back later if you're busy." "No, please stay," Eleanor said, gathering the papers into a neat stack. "I was just catching up on some work." Andre placed the muffins on her bedside table, noticing other changes in the room. A sleek tablet he hadn't seen before, an expensive-looking leather portfolio, and several bouquets of flowers that definitely hadn't come from the hospital gift shop. "Your company finally noticed you were missing?" he asked lightly, nodding toward the flowers. Eleanor's smile seemed strained. "Something like that." An awkward silence fell between them for the first time since they'd met. Andre sat in his usual chair, trying to recapture their easy rapport. "The doctor says you're being discharged tomorrow." "That's good news." "Yes," Eleanor agreed, then hesitated. "Andre, there's something I need to tell you." Before she could continue, the door opened and a nurse entered with a magazine in hand. "Ms. Chen, I hope I'm not interrupting, but I just realized, are you the Eleanor Chen from the magazine?" She held up a business publication with Eleanor's face on the cover. Andre's eyes widened as he looked from the magazine to Eleanor, recognition dawning slowly. Eleanor sighed, her shoulders dropping slightly. "Yes, that's me." The nurse broke into an excited smile. "My husband works in tech. He talks about your company all the time. Would you mind an autograph? He'd never believe I met you otherwise." Eleanor nodded politely, signing the magazine before the nurse left, practically bouncing with excitement. In the silence that followed, Andre stared at Eleanor with new understanding. Chentech Global. The $50 million donation to the national parks, that was you. It wasn't a question, but Eleanor answered anyway. "Yes?" Andre stood abruptly, pacing the small room. "Why didn't you tell me? All this time, I've been rambling about park budgets and trail maintenance to one of the richest women in the country. The world, actually." Eleanor corrected quietly, then winced at his expression. "That's not important." "I didn't tell you because it was nice to just be a person for once." Andre ran a hand over his close-cropped hair, trying to process this revelation. "So the donation, was that because of what happened to you?" Some kind of guilt money? Eleanor's face hardened. No. It was because you showed me how important the park is, how much it needs proper funding. I was in a position to help, so I did. Just like that. $50 million because we played chess and ate sandwiches. Is that so hard to believe? Eleanor challenged. That I might care about something you care about. Andre stopped pacing, studying her face. The Eleanor he'd come to know over the past 2 weeks, thoughtful, sharp-witted, sometimes vulnerable, seemed at odds with the powerful CEO on the magazine cover. Yet they were the same person. I don't know what to think, he admitted finally. I feel like I've been talking to someone wearing a mask. Eleanor flinched slightly at his words. I wasn't wearing a mask, Andre. If anything, this is the first time in years I've been able to take the mask off. She gestured toward the magazine. That person, CEO Eleanor Chen, she's the mask I wear every day. Andre sat down again, his initial shock fading. Why the secrecy? Were you worried I'd ask for money? No, Eleanor said immediately. That never crossed my mind. You're not that kind of person. She paused, searching for the right words. People treat me differently when they know who I am. They want something, funding, connections, a job for their nephew. They laugh too hard at my jokes. They agree with everything I say. Nothing feels real anymore. Andre considered this, thinking about how wealth and power created invisible barriers. And our friendship? Was that real? The most real thing I've felt in years, Eleanor answered, her voice low and sincere. That's why I was going to tell you today before you found out another way. I didn't want to lie to you anymore. The man in the suit appeared at the doorway again. Ms. Chen, the car will be ready tomorrow at 10 for your discharge. We've arranged for the private physical therapy team to meet you at the penthouse. Thank you, Thomas, Eleanor said, her voice shifting subtly into what Andre now recognized as her CEO tone. Could you give us a few more minutes? When they were alone again, Andre shook his head slowly. Penthouse. Private therapy team. It's like you live in a different world. I do, Eleanor acknowledged, but that doesn't mean we can't still be friends. Andre stood, suddenly feeling out of place in his worn ranger uniform. I should go. You probably have important CEO things to do. Andre, wait. Eleanor reached for his hand, surprising both of them with the gesture. Don't let this change things, please. He looked down at their hands, his calloused from years of outdoor work, hers surprisingly strong for someone who presumably spent her days in boardrooms. I don't know if it's possible for it not to change things. Eleanor withdrew her hand slowly. At least come see me before I leave tomorrow. I have a proposal I want to discuss with you. Andre hesitated, then nodded. I'll try. He picked up his hat from the chair. Get some rest, Eleanor. Or should I call you Ms. Chen now? Please don't, she said quietly. I've had enough of Ms. Chen to last a lifetime. After Andre left, Eleanor stared at the closed door, then at the magazine with her face on it. She'd built her company from nothing, revolutionized 3 different industries and amassed more wealth than she could spend in 10 lifetimes. Yet somehow the thought of losing the friendship of one park ranger hurt more than she could have imagined. The next morning, Andre stood outside the hospital, debating whether to go in. He'd barely slept, his mind racing with questions and confusion. The woman he'd rescued, the woman he'd visited daily and grown to care about, was Eleanor Chen, a legend in the tech world, a billionaire whose net worth was greater than the GDP of some small countries. Part of him wanted to walk away. What could someone like him possibly offer someone like her? Their worlds couldn't be more different. Yet another part remembered the look in her eyes when she'd asked him not to let things change. The vulnerability there had been real. Finally making his decision, Andre entered the hospital and took the elevator to Eleanor's floor. Outside her room, several people in business attire were gathered, speaking in low, urgent tones about stock prices and board meetings. Thomas, the suited man from yesterday, noticed Andre and approached. Ranger Collins, Ms. Chen is expecting you. He gestured toward the door. She asked to speak with you privately before departure. The business group parted to let Andre through, their curious glances making him acutely aware of his uniform and muddy boots. He squared his shoulders and knocked on the door. Eleanor sat on the edge of the bed, dressed in simple but clearly expensive clothes, her broken leg propped up, crutches leaning nearby. Her face brightened when she saw him. You came. I said I would, Andre replied, noticing how different she looked out of the hospital gown. More polished, but somehow smaller too. I wasn't sure after yesterday. Eleanor nodded Ed toward a chair. Please sit. What I have to say won't take long. Andre sat, noting how the business people outside kept glancing through the door's window. Your entourage seems anxious to get you back. They're always anxious about something, Eleanor said with a small smile. But they can wait. This is more important. She took a deep breath. I've established a new conservation foundation focused on Silverstone National Park. The paperwork is being finalized as we speak. Andre blinked in surprise. That's generous. The Park Service will be grateful. I'm not just telling you this as information, Eleanor continued. I'm offering you a position as the foundation's director. Full creative control over educational programs, conservation efforts, trail maintenance, all the things you've talked about wanting to improve. Andre stared at her, speechless. The salary is competitive, Eleanor added when he didn't respond. And before you ask, this isn't charity or guilt money. It's an investment in someone I believe in. Someone who knows the park better than anyone and cares about its future. Andre found his voice at last. Why me? You must know dozens of more qualified people. More degrees, perhaps. More business experience, certainly. Eleanor leaned forward slightly. But qualified. No one is more qualified than you, Andre. I've heard the passion in your voice when you talk about protecting that land. I've seen how you interact with visitors. You understand that conservation isn't just about preserving trees and trails, it's about connecting people with nature. Her words struck a chord deep within him, the very thing he'd always believed but rarely articulated. You don't have to answer right now, Eleanor said. Take time to think about it. The foundation will proceed either way, but I'd rather have you leading it. Andre looked at this woman who'd crashed into his life, literally, just weeks ago. The billionaire CEO with the power to create foundations with a single phone call. The same woman who'd gripped his hand through the pain of setting her broken leg. Who'd beaten him at chess 3 games in a row. Who'd listened to his park stories with genuine interest. If I take this position, he said slowly, it would be because I believe in the work. Not because of our friendship, Eleanor nodded. I would expect nothing less. And I'd need complete independence. No corporate interference in conservation decisions. Already written into the foundation's charter, she assured him. Andre took a deep breath. Then I'll consider it. Seriously consider it. Eleanor's smile was worth more than all her billions. That's all I ask. Outside the door, Thomas cleared his throat pointedly. Their time was up. As Eleanor gathered her things to leave, the distance between their worlds seemed both vast and insignificant. Whatever came next would be complicated, challenging, and entirely uncharted territory for both of them. 2 months after Eleanor's hospital discharge, Andre stood at the edge of Eagle Ridge, watching the sun rise over Silverstone National Park. The first pink-gold rays touched the distant peaks, then gradually washed down the mountainsides, bringing the landscape to life. After 16 years of sunrise patrols, the beauty still took his breath away. His radio crackled. Collins, you at the ridge yet? Over. Andre unclipped the radio from his belt. Just got here. Beginning assessment now. Over. Roger that. New team arrives at 10. Foundation folks want a full tour. Over. Copy. I'll be back by 9:30. Out. Andre replaced the radio and pulled out his tablet, a recent upgrade for all rangers, courtesy of the new Silverstone Conservation Foundation. The changes of the past 2 months still felt surreal. After 3 weeks of careful consideration, lengthy discussions with his park supervisor, and one very long call with his mother, Andre had accepted Eleanor's offer to direct the foundation. His official start date was still a week away, but the foundation's impact was already visible throughout the park. The first project, replacing every damaged safety railing, including the one where Eleanor had fallen, was nearly complete. New trail markers with enhanced GPS tracking had been installed. The visitor center renovations were underway. Most significantly, the park had hired back the 3 rangers lost to previous budget cuts, plus 2 additional positions. Andre began documenting the ridge conditions, noting areas where spring runoff might cause erosion problems. This particular spot where he'd found Eleanor that fateful day now featured a reinforced railing and improved signage. He ran his hand along the sturdy new barrier, remembering the fear in her eyes when he'd first reached her in the ravine. He hadn't seen Eleanor since she'd left the hospital. Their communication had been limited to formal emails about the foundation, occasional conference calls with lawyers and park officials, and one brief video meeting where Eleanor had looked exhausted. The sleek office behind her a stark contrast to the mountain backdrop that framed Andre's side of the call. Part of him understood the distance. They both had responsibilities. He was finishing his ranger duties while preparing for his new role, and she was running a global tech empire. But another part wondered if she regretted offering him the position, if the connection they'd formed during those hospital visits had been nothing more than a wealthy woman's passing interest in someone who'd helped her. Andre completed his assessment and began the hike back to headquarters. Along the way, he stopped to help a family with directions and pointed out a red-tailed hawk circling overhead to an excited group of schoolchildren on a field trip. These small interactions were what he loved most about his job, connecting people with the natural world, seeing the wonder in their eyes when they spotted wildlife or reached a spectacular viewpoint. Would the foundation director position still allow him these moments, or would he be trapped behind a desk drowning in paperwork and meetings? The question had haunted him for weeks. Back at headquarters, Andre showered and changed into his newest ranger uniform for the foundation team tour. As he buttoned the crisp shirt, Park Supervisor Rodriguez knocked on the locker room door. "Collins, they're here early, and there's a situation you should know about." Andre raised an eyebrow. "What kind of situation?" Rodriguez looked uncomfortable. Ms. Chen came herself. With the foundation team. Andre froze, his hand still on his collar. "Eleanor is here now?" "In the main conference room with the others." "I thought you'd want a heads up." "Thanks," Andre managed, his mind racing. "I'll be right there." After Rodriguez left, Andre took a deep breath, straightening his uniform one final time. He'd imagined seeing Eleanor again, of course, but not like this, not unexpectedly, with an audience of foundation staff and park officials watching their every interaction. The conference room fell silent when Andre entered. 6 people sat around the table: Rodriguez, 2 park board members, 2 professional-looking strangers with foundation badges, and Eleanor, her back to the door as she studied the large park map on the wall. "Sorry I'm late," Andre said, his voice steady despite the sudden pounding of his heart. "I was out at Eagle Ridge this morning." Eleanor turned, and the room seemed to shift slightly. She looked different, her hair styled in a sleek bob, her clothing elegant but practical for a park visit, her leg now fully healed. But her eyes were the same, brightening with genuine warmth when they landed on him. "Ranger Collins," she said formally, though her smile suggested she wanted to say more. "Thank you for making time for us today." Andre nodded, equally formal. "Of course, Ms. Chen." Rodriguez cleared his throat. "Now that everyone's here, perhaps we should begin the meeting before the tour." The next hour passed in a blur of presentations, questions, and discussions about the foundation's initial projects. Andre found himself watching Eleanor when she wasn't looking, the confident way she addressed concerns, her insightful questions about wildlife impacts, the respect with which she treated every person in the room regardless of their title. This was CEO Eleanor Chen, the woman on the magazine cover. Yet Andre caught glimpses of the Eleanor he'd known in the hospital, in the way she absently traced a scar on her palm. From the fall, he knew, in how she still tilted her head slightly when considering a difficult question. When the meeting concluded, Rodriguez announced, "Ranger Collins will lead the tour of our most critical areas. We've prepared a special vehicle to accommodate everyone." "Actually," Eleanor interjected smoothly, "I was hoping Ranger Collins might show me Eagle Ridge personally. The foundation team can take the standard tour with you and will rejoin the group afterward." Rodriguez looked surprised but nodded. "Of course, Ms. Chen, whatever you prefer." Minutes later, Andre found himself walking beside Eleanor on a quiet trail away from headquarters, neither speaking until they were well out of earshot of the others. "You look well," Andre finally said, breaking the silence. "The leg has healed completely." Eleanor nodded. "Good as new according to the doctors, though I've been told hiking alone is still inadvisable." A hint of her dry humor surfaced in her voice. "Wise doctors," Andre replied with a small smile. "I'm surprised you came yourself. I thought the foundation was just one of many projects for you." "It is," Eleanor acknowledged, "but it's important to me." She paused before adding quietly, "For many reasons." They walked further in silence, the familiar sounds of the forest surrounding them, birdsong, The rustle of leaves, the distant murmur of a stream. It felt strange and yet somehow right to be walking these trails with her. Again, this time with her steady on her own feet. "I've been following the Foundation's progress," Andre said eventually. "The impact is already visible throughout the park." "I'm glad to hear it." Eleanor stopped walking and turned to face him directly. "But that's not why I wanted to speak with you privately. I need to know if you're having second thoughts about your role." Andre blinked, surprised by her directness. "What makes you think that?" "Your emails have been professional, distant." Eleanor met his gaze unflinchingly. "If you've changed your mind, I need to know now before the official announcement next week." Andre considered his response carefully. "I haven't changed my mind, but I have concerns." "Tell me." "I took this job because I believe in what the Foundation stands for, protecting this land, educating people about its importance. But I worry that it might become just another corporate charity project, with decisions made based on what looks good in press releases, rather than what the park actually needs." Eleanor didn't appear offended by his honesty. "That's a fair concern. And," Andre continued, finding it easier to speak now that he'd started, "I worry about our working relationship. The last time we saw each other was complicated. Because you discovered I wasn't who you thought I was," Eleanor supplied. "No," Andre corrected her. "Because I discovered you were exactly who I thought you were, just with a few $1 billion I didn't know about." That drew a genuine laugh from Eleanor, the sound echoing slightly in the quiet forest. "Fair point." They resumed walking, the tension between them easing slightly. "For what it's worth," Eleanor said after a while, "the Foundation's charter ensures its independence. The board includes environmental experts, park officials, and community representatives, not just Chentech people. Your position as director gives you final say on all conservation decisions." "I've read the charter," Andre acknowledged. "It's impressive, thorough." "I had good motivation to get it right," Eleanor said softly. They reached a small clearing with a view of the mountains. Eleanor stopped, gazing out at the landscape. "I almost died out there," she said quietly. "It changes your perspective on things." Andre nodded. "Understanding completely. The night you stayed with me in that ravine," Eleanor continued, "you told me the mountains don't care who you are or what you own, that they treat everyone equally." She turned to face him. "It was the first honest thing anyone had said to me in years." "I meant it," Andre said. "I know." Eleanor's expression was open, vulnerable in a way he hadn't seen since the hospital. "That's why this foundation matters to me. That's why I wanted you to lead it. Not as a favor or because I feel I owe you something, but because you understand what matters out here." The sincerity in her voice touched something deep in Andre. "I do want this job," he admitted. "I'm just afraid of losing touch with what made me love this work in the first place. The land, the wildlife, connecting people with nature." Eleanor considered this, then said simply, "Then don't." "It's not that easy." "Why not?" she challenged. "Write it into your job description. 2 days a week in the field. Mandatory sunrise hikes, whatever you need to stay connected." Andre studied her face, realizing she was completely serious. "You'd allow that?" "I'd insist on it," Eleanor replied. "What good is a conservation director who never sets foot in the forest?" A weight Andre hadn't realized he'd been carrying lifted from his shoulders. "Maybe this could work after all. Does this mean you're still in?" Eleanor asked, a hint of uncertainty in her voice. Andre looked out at the mountains they both loved, then back at the remarkable woman beside him, a woman who had fallen into his life by chance and changed it forever. "I'm in," he confirmed. 100%. Eleanor's smile rivaled the sunlight filtering through the trees. "Good, because I have big plans for this place, Director Collins, and I can't do it without you." As they turned to head back to headquarters, Andre realized that despite all the changes, all the complications, one thing remained certain: the connection they'd formed was real, built on something far more valuable than wealth or status. It was built on shared values, mutual respect, and a common love for the wild, beautiful land that had brought them together in the first place. 2 years had passed since the day Andre found Eleanor in that ravine. 2 years since a chance encounter on a mountain trail had changed both their lives. The Silverstone Conservation Initiative had transformed from an idea into a nationally recognized success story, bringing new life to the park Andre had always loved. On this crisp autumn morning, Andre stood on the newly constructed observation deck overlooking the valley, watching as 3 yellow school buses pulled into the visitor center parking lot. From this distance, he could see tiny figures spilling out, children from the inner-city schools that were part of the Foundation's education program. Many of them had never seen mountains before today, never walked through a forest or spotted wildlife in its natural habitat. "Quite a view, isn't it?" a familiar voice said beside him. Andre turned to find Eleanor dressed in hiking boots and a practical jacket, her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. Despite her casual appearance, there was no disguising who she was anymore. Her face had appeared in too many news stories about the Foundation's work. "The best in the park," Andre agreed. "Perfect spot for the ceremony tomorrow." Eleanor nodded, looking out over the valley. "Hard to believe it's been 2 years. "Sometimes it feels like 2 decades, Andre said with a smile. "Other times, like 2 weeks. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the activity below. The visitor center, now a state-of-the-art facility with interactive exhibits and research stations, buzzed with activity. Park rangers led groups along the accessible trails that had been carefully designed to minimize environmental impact while maximizing the visitor experience. "The board is thrilled with the quarterly numbers," Eleanor said after a while. "Visitor engagement up 40%, conservation metrics exceeding targets, research partnerships with 3 major universities." Andre chuckled. "Always the CEO tracking the metrics. Old habits," Eleanor admitted with a small smile. "But even I have to admit, some things can't be measured in spreadsheets." She gestured toward the school groups below, now gathering around a ranger for their first nature lesson. Even from this distance, their excitement was palpable. "How many kids have come through the program now?" she asked. "Just over 5,000, Andre replied. "And we've trained 28 new junior rangers from communities that have historically had limited access to parks like this." He couldn't keep the pride from his voice. The junior ranger program had been his idea, giving teenagers from underserved areas the chance to learn conservation skills and eventually pursue careers in environmental science. "I read Darnell's college application essay," Eleanor said, "the one about how finding that rare butterfly species changed his career plans from business to biology." Andre nodded, remembering the teenager's face when he'd spotted the endangered Blue Mountain swallowtail. The pure wonder, the connection with something larger than himself. "He's got a full scholarship to State University's environmental science program. First person in his family to attend college." "That's what this was all about," Eleanor said softly. "Creating opportunities, connections." The wind picked up, bringing the scent of pine and distant snow. Winter would arrive early in the mountains this year. "The ceremony setup team needs final approval on a few things," Andre said, checking his watch. "Want to walk down together?" As they hiked the trail to the visitor center, Andre marveled at how much had changed. The first 6 months as Foundation director had been challenging, learning to navigate board meetings and budgets while maintaining his connection to the park itself. Eleanor had kept her word, insisting his role include regular time in the field. Their working relationship had evolved into a partnership based on mutual respect and shared goals. Their personal relationship had evolved too, though neither of them had put a label on it. Eleanor still lived primarily in the city, running her tech empire, but she visited the park at least twice a month. Sometimes these visits were official Foundation business. Other times they were simply 2 friends hiking familiar trails talking about everything and nothing. Today's visit was different. Tomorrow marked the official dedication of the Eagle Ridge Educational Center, built near the spot where they'd first met, and Eleanor would be speaking publicly about the Foundation for the first time. "Nervous about tomorrow?" Andre asked as they walked. Eleanor considered the question. "Not about the speech. I've given hundreds of those." "About being more publicly connected to the Foundation," Andre guessed. "No more working behind the scenes," she nodded. "The press will have a field day. Tech billionaire goes green. CEO's fall leads to fortune for national park. I can already see the headlines. Does that bother you?" Eleanor sighed. "I've spent years keeping my private life separate from my public image. This feels like crossing a boundary," Andre understood. Eleanor valued her privacy fiercely, Until now, she'd kept her personal connection to the foundation out of the spotlight, letting others serve as its public face while she provided guidance and resources behind the scenes. "You don't have to do this," he reminded her. "The communications team has prepared statements explaining your financial support, without mentioning the PURI,